Number 10. Wife beating. Argument. The West has criminal law, therefore wife beating is morally justified.
I'll just respond to this wife beating argument. Simple question, Haris. Do you believe women should be subject to laws? If you do believe that women should be subject to laws, then that means you believe women should be subject to all kinds of violence, including being beaten, jailed, even executed. That's what it means to be subject to the law. So there really is no difference between Islam on quote-unquote wife beating and human rights on this issue. Both Islam and human rights are in 100% agreement that women are accountable if they break the law, and that means Islam and human rights are in 100% agreement that women should be beaten. We only differ on who should do the beating. You say only the state. Only the state can punish women. Only the state should have a monopoly on all power and authority. Islam says, no, power should be distributed across kinship groups. And this means that the patriarch has authority to physically discipline members of his family, including his wives, if they violate important norms and values.
9. Women should not be educated. Argument. Women should not be empowered through career and education because Islam said so.
You know what? I don't believe in women's education. She kind of looked shocked back at me, stunned like I was from a different planet. Many of you watching this are probably just as confused as my wife was that night. But after I explained to her exactly why I don't believe in women's education and my Islamic reasons for this, she came to fully agree with me. I hope the same will be the case with everyone listening today. My position in this debate is simple. Pursuing education empowers women, but Islam is against empowering women. I know this sounds shocking to some, but hear me out. What I mean by empowerment is increasing social status and power through education or career.
A man who needs no introduction. Daniel Haqiqatjou is a person who synthesizes Islamic knowledge with his studies in philosophy. What he does quite effectively is he synthesizes his secular knowledge and with classical Islamic knowledge that he's also acquired through training.
Number 8. Executing homosexuals is his style. Argument. Homosexuals should be executed is his style because Islam said so.
Daniel shared this joke on Twitter. Oh man, I missed the International Day Against Homophobia. The best way to celebrate such a beautiful, momentous, important day is the Muslim way. Recreational base jumping. Daniel Haqiqatjou here is referencing the Islamic punishment to execute gay people by throwing them off a high place and making their punishment a spectacle for people.
Note, I personally don't aspire or align with these abhorrent views. I'm just quoting another person's beliefs. 7. Slavery is better than employment. Argument. Slavery is better than employment because people are like cars.
Do you believe that slavery is an ideal system? Do you believe that that there should be slaves in a society? Do you think slavery is okay?
Yeah, I mean, slavery is something that I do not find to be immoral. Is there really a fundamental difference between wage labor and slave labor? Is there a difference between owning someone versus renting someone? Renting someone is worse because think about the difference between owning a car and renting a car. When you rent a car, you drive it, in a very abusive kind of way, as opposed to owning it where that's your investment, you care about it. Anyway, so that's something that's uncomfortable for people who are raised in the West. The legal concepts underlying slavery exist within the employer-employee contract. of wage labor. In many cultures, there's not really a difference between saying that person A, like Ridvan owns George. Okay, that's a slave relationship. Ridvan owns George. There's not really a difference between that and saying that George has a contractual obligation to Ridvan.
Number 6, misogynistic rant. Guys, I don't know what's worse or what's better from these buffoons. I don't know anymore what's worse. I put random at this point.
Or the women and children can be left, alone to fend for themselves. How long do you think they're going to last by themselves? Even in the modern period, if a lot of people make this argument, if today all the men disappeared in the world and only women and children were left, how long do you think that they would last? Even with all the technology that makes life so convenient and easy. Well, the power would go out pretty soon because the electric grid, it's men who are doing the job of maintaining the infrastructure of the country. So your power, your clean running water, your gas pipelines, all of this would be gone within a week, maximum a week, but probably way before that, maybe the first day, the first hour maybe, depending on where you live. So no electricity, no water, no transportation. You can't use your electric car, your nice little Tesla, to drive to the grocery store. You're not going to have gas for your nice minivan to drive to the grocery store, go to the restaurant. You can't use your phone because it's not charged to order Uber Eats, and who's going to even drive that Uber Eats to bring your meal? Netflix is gone, so oh my god, that's going to be a big problem. And what else? Like, how are you going to get your food? What about all of the agricultural industry, all the shipping, all the truck driving? All of that is men. They're all dead. So how long are you going to survive in the modern world as women when that happens? A day, 2 days? When is the food going to run out? And a lot of people make this argument nowadays because it's so obvious the answer. All of these strong, independent women, it doesn't matter how strong and independent women are. I'm not a misogynist, but let's be real.
5, the social necessity for sex slavery. Argument. Taking sex slaves is a necessity for surviving and utility. And no, Islam is not from the devil. Right, guys? Right.
Again, like from a utilitarian perspective, utilitarian morality, which presumably he and other atheists and liberals accept, you have to take slaves, sex slaves, when you conquer people in the pre-modern world especially. You have to do that. Otherwise, you are going to be at a significant disadvantage that will lead to your extermination, your people's extermination.
Right.
Take the women of the conquered tribe. If you don't take them, what is going to happen to them? What is going to happen? They'll die, okay, or they'll be invaded by other people. I can just imagine like a liberal mind thinking that, well, those women should be, just respected and be, given equal status in society, and they should just be living free. But this is nonsense. This is nonsense. You have to coerce. You have to coerce those women to integrate into your society, or you can just leave them to die. You can leave them to die. The imam, as I mentioned, can make that choice. He can say that we're not taking any concubines. We're not taking any slaves.
Number 4, offensive jihad is justified. Argument. Offensive jihad is justified like the UN can use force to spread human rights.
Did Islam spread by the sword? Yes.
But the point is that yes, Islam spread by military conquest, and jihad is not only defensive, it can be offensive as well. But isn't this completely immoral? Isn't this completely barbaric and contrary to religious freedom? Let me ask you a question. Do you agree with the Geneva Conventions? Do you accept the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Do you accept the idea that international bodies have the right to enforce certain standards of justice across the entire globe?
Mansour from Speaker's Corner liked this video and tweeted, "Is jihad only defensive? Did Islam spread by the sword?" Dania Haqiqatjou with an unapologetic answer. Right. Number 3. The necessity to execute people who change their religion. Argument. There is a moral necessity for death for apostasy to secure people's afterlife.
If it was discovered that you've apostatized, you'd have you'd be detained, you'd have 3 days to change your mind and to say, look, I reconsidered. And if you didn't do that, then it would be capital punishment.
Who's getting harmed there now? Like, when we're talking about a harm.
All of society would get harmed.
Because of our
you're advertising, you're speaking about leaving the religion, and that threatens everyone's afterlife because other people might see that and hear about that and be affected by that. You're planning to like broadcast your shows in the Middle East and in Muslim countries, so you're threatening the afterlife and the happiness, the ultimate happiness of millions of people with that act. The state, I'm just applying your secular definition, Ali, of maximizing happiness, okay? So if we want to maximize happiness of the most amount of people, we have to have severe consequences for apostasy.
Right. Number 2. Old enough to bleed, old enough to breed.
When there are signs of physical maturity, it becomes permissible for the husband in Islamic law to have marital relationships or consummate the relation with his bride. And this is the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Do you know what precocious puberty is?
Starting puberty unusually early.
Is there anything in Islam that prevents you from, a man marrying a 5-year-old that started precocious puberty?
You can arrange a marriage even as an infant, but that doesn't mean that sex is allowed.
Could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old, consummate it if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible, as I said.
What about age 4?
If there are signs
3.
So this is something that becomes biologically impossible because
I have a
puberty,
study that shows it goes as early as 11 months.
Well, that's something that the parents would not. See, the thing about Islamic marriage is that parents are involved at these ages. And when you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as soon as she's showing signs of an imminent fertility, if you can start, that's something that is explained evolutionarily. I don't believe in evolution. I know that you do. But they explain it that this is an adaptation, because if you can start fertilizing a female as soon as she's showing signs of an imminent fertility, the period, menarche, then that will maximize, because you secured the female right at the beginning, the start of when she will potentially see, then yes, that's permissible.
Okay, let's have that again here.
Old enough to bleed, old enough to breed. You know,
question is,
for years I've been saying, and keep in mind, that's not even what you get from the Quran. The Quran refers to marrying, having sex with, and divorcing girls before they've ever reached puberty.
And our number 1 for today: human rights is a bad thing.
This extremist liberal human rights ideology is set to destroy the human race itself. And Islam is the only religion and the only community that is pushing back and saying, no, we want to be human beings. We want to preserve our marriages, our families, our community, our humanity. We don't want this never-ending nightmare of human rights. No, thank you. We need to be clear here. This is not a debate about Sharia rejects freedom and equality versus human rights accepts them. This is really a debate about should we have restrictions on freedom and equality in order to preserve other important values versus no limits, freedom and equality extremism of Harris. That is what this debate is really about. Harris is selling you this extremism, and it's exactly like the child that only eats candy. That child is eventually going to die, just like these liberal societies are dying terrible deaths. But Sharia is the balanced meal, and that's why we need Sharia. Seem to be getting it. I'm arguing that Sharia law is superior to human rights because Sharia rule preserves marriage and family. Okay, and human rights doesn't. It destroys marriage and family and community and the human race.
Rates are also going down.
Yeah, but
Muslims' birth rates are also going down.
I can see that. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. It shows exactly why development and modernization and human rights is a bad thing. That's my entire point.
So less should we have?
You can't show me how human rights. Sharia, that's what you should have. Where a child can be in a family surrounded by loving family members, his father, his wife, maybe a co-wife, cousins, aunts, uncles. All that's a beautiful, stable family, very high fertility. This is the beautiful example of family life that Islam promotes. What does human rights promote? Human rights promotes a child with his single mother just going to school and falling into drugs and mental health problems. That's what human rights offers the world. And we see that with the numbers, we see that with all the stats that I gave you.
Okay. You see, I managed to hear this buffoon for 10 clips without responding. Okay? I'm like Hercules doing his trials. That was very hard for me, believe it or not. So, what human rights provide for family? Let's read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Not like in Islam, in other words. Let's go to the second. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion. Daniel and the mental disease he calls religion wants to distinguish people according to sex, language, religion, political opinion. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Not slaves, apparently. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude slavery, and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all its forms. Not according to Daniel, no. No one shall be subject to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. How is the hudud working on this direction? Good, eh? Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Eh? Not slave, I suppose. Eh, Daniel? Now I know why you hate human rights. It's because USA invaded Afghanistan, right? All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Not just Muslim males, Daniel. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunal for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. Not just Muslim males, Daniel, everybody, including women and slaves. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. That is including women, Daniel. Everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. Not like in Sharia, Daniel, you know, a real court. Everyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law in a public trial at which he has had all the guarantees necessary for his defense. Are unbelievers innocent, Daniel? That is the question we need to ask. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. That includes gay people, Daniel. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. That includes women, Daniel, without a mahram. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. You know, like persecuting Christians and other minorities. That is, Daniel. Everyone has the right to nationality. That is against Hizb ut-Tahrir, though, Daniel. You don't have national borders, isn't that right, in Islam? Now we came to the family part. Let's see what human rights say about family. Men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality or religion have the right to marry and found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage and at its dissolution. Marriage shall be entered only with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. The family is the natural and fundamental unit of society, entitled to the protection by society and the state. And that is what human rights say about family. It doesn't say single mothers and children doing drugs. That is you straw-manning human rights, Daniel. Now that we've seen what human rights say about marriage, Daniel, now let's see what Islam says about marriage, Daniel. Polygyny, spouse abuse, child marriages, arranged marriages. Children should not be educated or being empowered if they are females. Concubines, spouse cannot refuse intercourse. In other words, spouse rape. Restrictions of movement for the wives. Males can have many families even in secret. Listen to this, people. Discriminatory marital rights and obligations always favoring the husband, who is the dictator in a toxic patriarchy. Husbands being able to divorce their wives by just saying, "I divorce you" 3 times. Okay, Daniel, anything else maybe? Sorry guys, but it's